Okay. That's fine with me.
Mhm. Excellent. Well, on behalf of the C's mentors and the C's, the NASA C's high school interns, mosquito mappers. Oh my, is that yours? That's funny.
No, it's for our union. Cut COVID, not CUNY.
Okay, Radical, take that down now. You can't be political.
I thought some of the students might appreciate that, given what's some of their pictures and everything. I'll go back to the nice book.
Yeah, I think we all appreciate that right now. Universities are really having a hard time with the COVID and managing their budgets and trying to figure out what to do. And, you know, our guest lecturer right now, Becky, is in Canada, and she might have to teach in the fall. We don't even know if she can get across the border. So we're living in very, very unusual times. I'd like to now introduce Becky Boger. She is someone that I have known since, well, more than 15 years. We worked together at the Globe program in Boulder, Colorado. That's where we got to know each other. We have since undertaken a number of different activities and research projects together. Most recently, she has been leading a project in Barbuda, where we have been trying to document land cover change that are the results of Hurricane Maria, and comparing past satellite data to contemporary land cover observations. But she also is involved in many other things. She is a professor in the Earth and Environmental Sciences Department at Brooklyn College. She's also the director of the Urban Sustainability Program. And she is a super whiz at GIS. And she and I taught one of the very first online GIS classes way back when, together, bringing together students from Brooklyn College and University of Nebraska-Lincoln. So without further ado, I'd like to let Becky get started. If you have questions, that there seems to be a place that you can just interject them. I don't think she minds if you speak up. But if it's a little bit longer question, but if it's a little bit longer question, go ahead and just put it in the chat, and then she'll get to it at the end. So thank you very much for attending this webinar. I'm really excited about it. And Becky, it's your floor. Thank you so much.
Okay, I am going to share my screen and show a PowerPoint presentation while I am talking. Okay, so I think you should be seeing Exploring the Wonderful World of ArcGIS Online, right?
Yes.
So when Rusty says I'm an expert in, or a whiz, remember what word she used in GIS. Yeah, I've been working with GIS for a while, but I guess you're a whiz when you can say that you don't know everything, but that I'm always learning. And that, but I do feel confident that I can figure it out, because these technologies are always changing. The interface may be changing, the abilities might be changing, so you just have to go with the flow of it, because what you may have done a month or whatever ago might not be exactly quite the same, and there's always something new that's being developed. So I'm going to show you some of the things that you can do and my main outcome is that you get a tasting that you want more. Okay, so I understand that you have been working with ArcGIS Online. So if you have any questions about that, I'm going to give you a brief overview of ArcGIS Online and some differences between Arcgis Desktop. And take it from there, because this is a NASA fellowship, right? Fellowship or internship, one of those, Rusty, right? So your focus is on using NASA data, which can be a little bit limitations that you can use with ArcGIS Online versus what you're using with Arcgis Desktop. But there's still a lot that you can do with ArcGIS Online. Okay, so this is a GIS software world, and there are a variety of options that I was just hinting at just now. We're focusing on ArcGIS Online, and within ArcGIS Online, there are different versions with different types of capabilities. So there is a free public version that you can just sign up. It has limited capabilities of what you can do and the size of the files that you can use in it. Then there's ones that are associated with an organization, such as your college, our school, Brooklyn College. There is an organization license, and this has, and I guess there might be different contracts, licensing permissions with the capabilities, but with mine with Brooklyn College, part of City University of New York, we pretty much have everything. And then there's for business enterprise. I'm not as familiar with that because I've never used it and don't know. And then there's a developers, and there's actually a free version of that. You can go on, go to and sign up for it. It's and it has pretty much a lot that you can do with the, as with the organization. There, it is limited in the number of credits that you can use. So when you max it out, they're going to ask you that you have to pay for it. But it is something that you can, if you don't have a part of an organization license, you can really start with that with free version of the developers and do a lot with it. So that's with the online materials, and then you get into ArcGIS Desktop, and there are two main types of desktop versions, ArcMap, and then ArcGIS Pro. ArcGIS Pro being the newest one, that is eventually, I guess, going to replace or is in the process of replacing ArcMap. And ArcGIS Pro is, that's what I've switched over to mainly. And there's pluses and minuses for both of these programs. But what's great with ArcGIS Pro, it does do a more seamless interface between what we call image processing, using those like satellite remote sensing data and doing image processing, spectral analysis, classification, and whatnot, and then doing the other types of what we call GIS analysis, where you look at both vector and raster data sets and do all sorts of things with those data sets, and then you make all sorts of nice visualizations, mainly in the form of maps. And then there's also mobile technologies. There's apps different apps that you can download, and it's great that you can, well, there's one with the Survey 123, and I think that's also free. And you can create different apps to collect data. It's connected to ArcGIS Online. You can download it to desktop, and you have this kind of seamless interface between mobile, web, and desktop. So a lot of cool stuff. And this is just a screenshot with the graphics of some of the different products or software capabilities in ArcGIS. ArcGIS is a proprietary software run through or owned by the ESRI, I'll call it ESRI, Environmental Science Research Institute. Okay. And they're one of the forerunners and one of the leading GIS companies with capabilities, developers. They do a lot. Okay, so this is, I'm just going to show you a few quick slides, just going over some of the basics of working with spatial data sets in GIS, so that we just have a grounding. Some of this you may already know. If you don't, please ask questions, but this will help give you a foundation for what is going to come next in the subjects that I talk about. So we have the real world, and we're going to be capturing this in a digital realm. And working with these spatial data sets, everything is geolocated. Look, there's spatial coordinates, and you can find it someplace on the Earth. And there's two ways of capturing the real, there are two main models, if you want, models of the real world that you can capture in a GIS. You have vectors and you have rasters. And in vector, you are, it's objects, features that are captured in the form of either points, lines, or polygons. So an area of a grassland will be a polygon. An area, if there's a river, it could be a linear feature. You represent it as linear, as a line. A point, such as a tree or a building or whatever, you can capture that as a point. And that's also dependent on the scale that you're capturing the data, but we won't get into that. That's more to come as you work with the data sets. Then there's raster data sets, and just imagine you place graph paper over the earth and you associate some sort of value with each of those little grids, which are called pixels. And so there's one value associated with whatever you're capturing. That could be atmosphere, it could be, it could be temperature, precipitation, it could be land cover types, it could be all sorts of things. And you can, so that you can have often the same phenomena or feature in the real world, you can represent it in one of these two ways. They can be represented both ways for many things. So raster data sets, and these are the data sets that satellite data are going to be in, such as looking at satellite collected about precipitation, or satellite with different cloud information, elevation. These are all going to be in a raster data set. And so there are two main types of raster data sets. Continuous, this is like elevation. Elevation is everywhere, and it's continuously varying from like 1 meter to 1.1 meter to 5 meters and so on. So that's a continuous data set, and that's for a large part what raster data sets are used for. And then there's thematic, such as land cover, in which you are giving each value denotes some sort of feature. And in this case, it could be marsh, forest, or whatever, but it will be captured as a raster. And also another thing, when you get into the world of GIS and you're working with different data sets that are coming from different organizations, different years, you could be dealing with historical data. There's all sorts of different data file formats that you're going to have to get used to. So just be aware of that. You become, you're always looking at the extensions of a file name. Is it a .docx or is it a .shp, .jpg? It becomes second nature that you're looking at the extensions to find out what type of data set it is that you're using. And then vector, again, is points, lines, and polygons. So it's captured and there's coordinates associated with those points. And a line is connections between the points. And a polygon is a line that is connected to its beginning point, and there's area associated with it. Okay. So why am I partly giving you this overview? That is, just some basics of working with GIS and spatial data sets. But also, this also involves what types of software that you can use. So let me just move here. Hold on just a sec. Let me get out of that. Okay, wait. So the satellite data, largely raster data sets that you're going to be using. ArcGIS Online, the types of spatial analysis that you can do and how you visualize the spatial data sets. It mainly deals with vector data sets. Now, this is always something to be changing. Did someone want to say something or ask me a question? So I'm trying to get my chat screen in case I see that. Hold on here. Let me see if I can get this off the.
So far, Becky, there are no, Peter has been able to answer the questions about Raster and Becky
Wonderful.
for you. And
Okay,
unless
great.
someone wants to say something, we're really good. And
okay, great, because I can't figure out right now how to see my chat while I am on the.
Yeah, it's pretty confusing. Yeah, but you know what? You know that I have no problem interjecting and interrupting you, right?
Perfect.
So.
And if I'm talking too fast, tell me to slow down.
No, this is,
okay.
I think this is very good. Yeah.
Becky, I did actually want to interject right in here.
Sure.
We had previously talked about ImageJ as to analyze or to try to count mosquito larvae. So you might kind of mention that when you're talking about raster datasets and kind of this analysis, like what tool do you use and why are there so many? You know, ImageJ, you know, why would you use that? Some things like that. So that would be a good thing to help them understand right now. Between
well, I'm so immersed in the Esri products because I use that so much, and I don't use necessarily the other products as much. And so there are, you know, I know ImageJ is very good. It has a simple interface. It is free. And so it can do a lot. It can do a spectral analysis, right? It can do spatial signatures and clustering and image enhancement and all of that. Is that correct?
That's
Peter?
correct.
Yep, exactly. So it essentially, so this is kind of that transferability between software packages, right? That even though you might work in ImageJ at one point, a lot of what you're talking about can be transferred back and forth. Yeah. Fundamental concepts. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that since people have heard about ImageJ, we'd even been talking about our images that we're collecting with Globe Observer and some of that. It correlates really well with this piece. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so this is also, it deals with, you know, why are there a lot of different formats? And part of it is, you know, different people, different companies, and you get into proprietary rights, and they have created different data formats. Or, you know, as the technology improves, you know, you transition into a different data format. And then you're interfacing between these different types of software packages, be it something that might be focused on vector analysis, one that focuses on image analysis, and you might be wanting to bring them together in different ways. So like with what I'm talking about here with these Esri products, they're all proprietary, they're expensive. I, as an individual, wouldn't have this it would be too costly for me. But as I'm associated with an organization, I have it readily available for me. There's another software GIS called Qgis, and you may have heard of that. And that's free, and that's an open source. I have used it. It's quite, when I use it, but this has been many years ago. It has a fairly easy interface. But that is also in its development, it is dependent on the users to develop the code and the modules so that you can do what you want. So that is also very cool. If you are a programmer, you can develop your own programs, your own modules for what application you want to have run. You can also develop your program and do different applications here within Esri. There's a certain amount of development that you can use. They work with Python, I think primarily or solely. Anyway, so getting back to, so with the AGO, as I'm going to use it, ArcGIS Online mainly deals with vector data analysis. Desktop ArcGIS works with both vector and raster data analysis. And again, you can work with your desktop and then upload data sets to your AGO ArcGIS Online account. And then there's all sorts of things you can do to develop websites or embed it in a website. all sorts of different applications. You can create different apps, story maps if you've been using story maps, but all sorts of things that you can do. And it's very, very cool with these templates that have been created through the ArcGIS software. So, and with desktop, you can look at raster datasets and work with them and analyze them on desktop. You can then upload them to ArcGIS Online, but you're going to be limited or incapable of doing any additional analysis with the raster datasets, whereas you can with the vector datasets. So this is also, I want to talk a little bit about finding data. So getting a taste, you know, when you start to see, get exposed to GIS and you start to get the click on, you know, wow, there's so, I mean, the whole world is opened up to you in the types of analysis that you can do. And there are lots and lots of data out there readily available for you to use if you know how to use it. So NASA is providing all of these portals for you to access data. You have an idea of a project that you want to do. Where can I get the data? Is it going to be up to date? Is it going to be good quality? Is it going to be at a resolution that you need? So there are lots of data out there, and I'm going to show you some of them. I'm going to show you through ArcGIS Online, Living Atlas, where you can actually access data sets that were probably that were derived from NASA data or other government organization. You can also access data directly, like you probably have learned, through the NASA site, state and federal government sites. I'm going to show you how to access some temperature data taken at meteorological sites through NOAA, a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. There's all sorts of different GIS clearinghouses. It could be at the state. If you're working on state level information or something, like in New York State has a great GIS clearinghouse. You can go to that and do searches. There might be data sets available through university or research organization. But you also have to be very critical about the data that you're looking at. Just because it's out there, it doesn't necessarily mean it's good. So good data in, you have the possibility of having good results. Bad data, you got bad data out. So you really have to immerse yourself in understanding the quality of data, what you can do with it reasonably, the limitations. Sometimes you just have to say, well, this is the best I can get. And then you run your analysis and say, okay, I think this is showing whatever outcomes you have, but you also have to then put your caveats there and always end, well, we need to get additional data or additional research. For scientists, there's never enough data. So this is metadata, data about data. A lot of the data sets you will access will have either embedded within the data set when you open it up in the software, or there may be information on the website that will give you about when it was collected, how it was collected, what's the spatial resolution, temporal resolution, and so on. And that you can use, that's always important information that you should look at to see again if this data set that you're looking at is really one that is good for you to use. And here, this is, you may have been looking at the data that you can access directly through the NASA. So here, have you, Rusty and Peter, have you been introduced them to this website or?
Not that one. I've been showing the earthdata.nasa.gov, which takes you basically to the same kind of place. That's one of the fun things about this, isn't it, Becky? Is there's usually about 8 different doors into the same location.
Right. That's exactly true. And that's because so this is another one, the one that I use a lot, which you're going to access NASA data. I really like Glovis. Mm-hmm. And so this is run, I guess, through the USGS, And this is just a screenshot, but you can look at what data sets are available, what satellite missions, Sentinel, Landsat, or Aster, or whatever, and then you have a very interactive map that you can go through and see what % cloud cover there is. Is it going to be, good for what you're using? And so, for instance, with looking at Barbuda Analysis, I use this tool to find nearly cloud-free data sets of Barbuda shortly before the hurricane struck and then shortly after the hurricane struck, so that you can get a comparison between the two to get direct, to look at direct impacts and then do, NDVI analysis or whatever to look at the impact on the vegetation and the built structure. So this one, and some of these, like this one, you have to sign up. You have to create an account for Globus, but it's free. So no big deal. I'm also going to introduce you through the, and I'm going to give you go through an exercise that's looking at temperature data and then bringing in population data, population density. So demographic information is if you want to look at human environment interactions. I'm going to show you how to develop a surface from point data on temperature to look at the urban heat island effect. And then you can look at all sorts of other types of data sets once you've created your urban heat island interpolated surface to then look at relationships between land cover types, population density, and so on. And you can then start looking at also various equity issues of who is being impacted where by what. So, so looking at the census data, and I'm also going to give a plug. This is our 10-year decadal census data. I hope if you're old enough to be filling out a census, you need to put your census in. This is so important for how money is distributed in the United States in terms of for all sorts of social programs. So we really need to get an accurate representation of our people living there. The US Census data here is not a necessary, I haven't actually, they've updated it under the Trump administration. I am not used to this interface. I haven't used it so much. It looks very cumbersome to me. But another one that you can log into, and I don't think you have to pay for this one. I haven't used this in a while either. The Social Explorer. So you can, this one has a much easier interface that you can go and download data. These data sets are going to be vector data sets. So you can download it and if you want, bring it into your ArcGIS Online pretty easily. So, and just to finish up on getting data, if you have a project or an idea of what you want to do and you want to see if there's data out there, I generally just go to Google and I'll put in on the browser the topic I want plus GIS. I may put the word download so that I know that it's downloadable. Common format in using for vector files is shape files. Skip the bottom one. That's an old format that you don't need to use very often. That E00. And clearinghouse sites, you'll get, when you do this, there are ones that you trust and that are relevant to the type of work and that you just go to them automatically. So there are, like the Globus one that I go to. That's one of my first, when I'm looking for satellite data, that's generally the first one I go to. Challenges come in. Every site is different. You have to look. You have to familiarize with the format or how they're leading you through. Again, the data formats. Not sites get changed or don't work as advertised. Not all downloads are good for you, and you just have to don't get uptight about it and just keep on trying. If something doesn't work out the way you want, and just keep at it. Something will work out eventually. One thing you need to, as a computer skill, if you're not already, become familiar with zipped folders. So you know how to zip something, you know how to extract something. Zipping is a data compression technique. There's different packages that decompress the files. Some I think are, you know, like on Windows at least, there's an app that comes with the program, I think, or with the Office suite. I'm not sure where it comes in, but it's there automatically. So just become comfortable with zipping and unzipping folders. Okay, so the other thing in getting into bringing in data into ArcGIS Online is you may be out there with existing data sets that are already geodata sets or georeferenced, but they are something that is immediately uploaded into the software, an ArcGIS line in this case, okay? And that's it, like a shapefile is a spatial data set. You can also bring in spreadsheets of data if there are coordinates of data, so a latitude and longitude values. And so and here I'm looking at this, there's latitude and longitude values, and they have to be in the decimal degree format, and they have to be, you know, so you can't, in spreadsheets, you don't want to mix numbers and letters. If it's a numerical value, you can't have any letters with those numbers. So you can't say 70 degrees west or 70 degrees east. It has to be either 76 or negative 76. And so that's actually something to, when you're looking at bringing in data sets, one of the first things you have to do is open it up. If you're looking at spreadsheets, you have to open up the spreadsheet in like an Excel package to make sure that it is formatted correctly for you to be brought into ArcGIS Online. It has gotten a lot easier and more robust, this software, ArcGIS Online, to bring in. It used to be a lot pickier in how the data have to be formatted. But so I'm just going to give you some general rules that general guidelines that when you're looking at a spreadsheet of data, some things to be mindful. If it's not uploading the way you want, you can't open it up in ArcGIS Online. Why? There are some things that you can look at in the spreadsheet to make sure that might be the reasons why it's not being able to read it. Some Excel spreadsheets may have no referencing values, but they're depending on the data set, you may be able to join it to a spatial data set. So, you know, looking at the demographic data, for instance, if you have county level population density. And so those are the counties are a spatial polygon. Okay, so it's located somewhere in space, and there's attributes associated to it, the spatial feature, but you might have another data set that you might be able to link to those county level spatial data sets with other attribute information. So there are ways that you might be able to do it if you don't have geographic information. This is a point, and this is from the Globe database, looking at downloading the mosquito habitat mapper. And so it does have latitude and longitude. In fact, there are two sets of latitude and longitude, one that is more precise than the other. I'm sure Peter and Rusty will or have gone through that with you. Anyway, but that's that's what the mosquito habitat mapper looks like. But these are some of the things that you might need to clean up to bring it into AGO. The file headings, the names of the columns of data can be tricky. And so you don't want any spaces in them. You might not, you don't see them, but that is, headers do not like spaces. So check to make sure that you don't have any spaces in your file header. Do not use any special symbols, and generally start a header name with a letter. Again, some of these may have changed. You might be able to start with number before. Before you couldn't start with a number in the file name, the header. Null field, things that say null can sometimes cause some problems, because null is a letter and it might be null for a value, a numerical value. So when you have a column of data that has both letters and numbers, it will read it as an alphanumeric. It will read it as text. And if you want that line to be read as numbers, you're going to have to get rid of all of these null values. So it may, have it replace it with nothing. Or if you want that information about null, you have a code, a numeric code for it. Otherwise, 15, 13, and 14 showing here, they will be read as letters, which means that you cannot then do any types of numeric analysis with it, okay? So make sure you look at your data and format it correctly in a spreadsheet.
So Becky, before you leave this, I actually want to highlight something, because this is this was something that took me a little while to experience and to figure out what's going on. So I just want to highlight that you notice in your, yes, right underneath there, you notice the way that the null, which is your text, is on the left-hand side of your column, and the numbers, which are numbers, are on the right-hand side of that column. Just that right there actually helps you to know what format that is in. And so I just wanted to point that out to everybody as an important characteristic of your data. And so sometimes, as Becky was talking about, whether it's numbers or whether it's text, is a really important piece. And the way that they display in the spreadsheet actually tells you how Excel or how the spreadsheet is actually understanding them. Are they really understanding that they're numbers, or are they really understanding that they're text? So that was something that a computer scientist had to kind of highlight to me. And so, once I learned it though, it was like, oh, that's a really quick way to understand my data a little bit better.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Another thing that can be tricky sometimes to bring in from a spreadsheet like this to AGO or other programs too are dates. Dates can be a tricky one. I've gotten into the habit of, for dates, I go for number year. So for today, I would go 20200707. So then I'm always going to have dates increase with time as dates move on. So I can graph things easily that way, and it will be interpreted numerically if you want, to have year, month, day in a 4-year, 2-month, two-digit month and 2-digit day. So that's another, that was the way I developed to get over some of the problems with integrating dates and then wanting to do different types of analysis with them.
And Becky, to that point about dates, that's really important. And one thing you'll start to see if you start working with satellite data, the date of the satellite image is a really important characteristic. And so that actually ends up in the file name in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all kinds of these different formats. Day of year, a sequential number from January 1st all the way out. And so just kind of, pay attention to that kind of thing and just kind of recognize that the date format I'd say is one that scientists have been less consistent about. And so you need to pay attention to that one in particular with it. And I'll say the globe data actually comes out not at the time you recorded your data, but in UTC, Universal Time Coordinates. And, and so I record my, one of my observations I submitted, I took at 5 p.m. Pacific time. It's in the globe database as the next day even. So, so this little piece I found to be one of the more problematic and challenging parts about working with data. So just a heads up for everybody out there. This one's a tricky one.
Yeah, dates are tricky. And also depending again, what, not necessarily the globe database, but you're dealing with European countries, you may be getting, you know, some data set from France, Denmark, whatever. In the United States, now I'm getting things confused. We go July 7th, 2020. Okay, so we'll go month, day, year. Well, a lot of other people go day, month, year. So, you know, those, the placement of the day and the month can be switched. So you have to make sure that you're, you know, interpreting it correctly. Oh, also, if you're another thing about data too, depending on the country, okay, we use a point at the end of our okay, it's 10.2. And we use a point as our decimal marker. Other places use a comma. So, you know, those are conventions that you have to make sure you're interpreting correctly. Sometimes there might be a second header, like there is with the globe data sets. And I think ArcGIS Online may now be able to accept it. But that may be causing a problem too. You just want one header and then the data, the actual data starts in the second row. So be aware of that. You might have to remove that or fix it up somehow. Okay, so that now just been going over some of the things that you have to think about as you're trying to work on a project. So now I'm going to go through an example, and I think Rusty, I used this actually in the spring, and this was based actually on one of the Esri lesson plans that they put out. They did it for a different part of the country. I created one for the New York City region for my introductory GIS class this past spring.
Right, and I just want to let people know, Becky, that you sent me the files, the .csv files that you used to import the data, and I posted those data sets in their webinar 6 folder. So if they want to reproduce what you're doing, they'll be able to.
Okay, great, awesome. And the other thing too, with this PowerPoint here, the different screenshots that I have that I'm referring to different data sets are all hyperlinked. So you can go and, you know, if you open up the presentation and click on it, it will take you to the site. Okay, so this exercise is using a NOAA temperature point data, and in ArcGIS Online, you're going to create a raster interpolated surface. And then you're going to bring in demographic data such as population density and explore relationships with other data sets through the ArcGIS Online. So this is an example of the NOAA website, and that you can go and look for. And the data set that we're going to use is a monthly average. I think it was for August 2019. But there's different options and different types of data that you can collect. And you can collect things in either Fahrenheit or Celsius, or and if you download the data sets, they actually give them both in Celsius and Fahrenheit. And so when you might have to clean it up. You are going to have to clean it up. This is what a cleaned up data set would be looking like. You have your header at the top here, station ID. You see how that underscore is there so that you can easily read it, but there's no spaces. So you don't want spaces. Another trick for eliminating spaces in like your file names, this one here is all in capital letters, but if you go capital S and then the rest in the lowercase and then capital I, you can easily see without having the underscore that it's station ID. So if you have two words, have the first letter to be capitalized, lowercase for the rest, and then when you go to the next word, you have it uppercase. Those are different techniques that have been developed to get rid of the spaces in your your column headers. So you open up ArcGIS Online and you create, open up a map, a blank map. Then you're going to bring in your point data. So here is just, this is what you're looking at here. To the left is just a base map, a satellite image that the software provides of the New York City area. And I'm going to add layer from file. And then I'm going to and then here, these are your options that you have. A shape file that will be in, it has to be in a zipped folder, because a shape file is made up of, they're a bundle of between 4 to 7 different individual files that have to be together in order for the data set to work properly. And so you have all those individual files zipped together in a folder, and you upload the zipped folder, not the individual files. A CSV or TXT files, these are the text files. These can be, the columns can be separated by comma, semicolon, or tab delimited. I find that the best one and the foolproof one is comma. I always go for a comma delimited file. I find tabs, I have never really used semicolon. I find that tabs can be problematic. GPS exchange format, I never have used that, and I haven't used actually GeoJSON, but these are formats. All of these can be brought into the ArcGIS Online. So you go navigate to it where your file is in your hard drive, and then you bring it in, okay? The other thing with when you're working with GIS and when you're having GIS and ArcGIS Online, you're working totally in the cloud, and all the data sets that you're using in ArcGIS are going to be in the cloud. You have a, you can create folders and subfolders to organize your data sets in ArcGIS Online. Likewise, on your desktop, in your computer, you managing and keeping track of your data when you're dealing with spatial data sets is really, really important. Data management. Most of the time when I'm working with students and they say, I can't find my file. I say, well, where did you put it? I don't know. If you don't know where you put the data file, I can't help you, right? So always make sure, don't use the default settings. You know, navigate, create folders, and know where you organize your data sets. Cannot overemphasize that. Okay, Peter, you're probably with me on that one, huh?
Definitely. I am
Okay.
definitely there with you. And so for everybody, you know, I actually, since Becky just showed us a great way to add our data, I actually in the chat just dropped in a spreadsheet that I use that shows all the center points of our areas of interest. So you can use that to go through exactly what Becky showed us. So I just wanted to share that with you guys as a way of doing this. And yes, file organization, file naming, all of these things are the minutia of science, but it's the difference between success and failure.
Exactly. And it can be great sources of frustration. And it could be something very simple, but it will, that you don't see, but it can stop you from doing it. The other advice I give to my students, sometimes they get really frustrated, and it's all part of the process. You know, and I say, well, stop now. You need to take a break from it. Come back. Generally, when you come back, oh yeah, you can see it a lot better, and you realize what's wrong. Oh, the other thing too is save often, because a computer may crash, and if it hasn't been saved, you lost your work. Okay, save often. Yeah, that's another thing. I cannot emphasize that. Okay, so this is when you bring it in, your data set, if it's formatted properly and all, voila, there it is. This is showing in a color ramp here. The imperial means the English system, and so this is in Fahrenheit. These are all the locations of the point data and their various gradations, showing the gradations of temperature. And you can see, even by examining this, that this is in the New York City region area here. You can see that for the most part, it's warmer, it gets cooler. It's starting to get warmer over here. Well, guess what? That's another city, Newark. We're in the Eastern Corridor. We have cities upon cities, right? So there could be some fluctuations, but you can start to see, yeah, New York City is definitely hotter for the most part than getting away from it. And this is Long Island here, the Hudson River going up here.
So Becky, not to totally distract you, but I have a question. Where did those values and that color ramp come from? Why does that work the way that it does?
You know, that's a good question. I'm not sure. That's just because I didn't play with it. It was just the whatever default. So I'm not sure. I have to go in and look at it. And I could do that. I could pull it up here. I'm going to.
Well, I kind of want to mention that you know,
yeah.
the default that you're kind of highlighting is you're getting the range of values right there, and this is a place where because you get a default, right? You might want to explore those values, what they mean, and play with that color ramp a little bit more, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And actually, after I can go on to ArcGIS Online and go through some of that, how you classify and visualize your data is also extremely important. And there is a bit, there's some rules or whatever that you can use in order to best represent what's going on in your data set. So classification, I mean, that's actually a really big topic and a really important topic as to how you visualize, how you classify and visualize your data. There's a wonderful little book called How to Lie with Maps. And you can classify data in a certain way with different color gradations or whatever, and totally tell the wrong story, or tell the story that the author wants to make, but it might not be an accurate representation of what is going on for real. Okay, so let me go back here again. So we have our point data, values associated with it. You can examine these, and I didn't have a screenshot of this, but you can now in ArcGIS Online open up your tables. You can make it like, yeah, classify it different way, make it look different in different ways. You can have different symbols. You don't need to have the points, just the little dots, all sorts of things that you can do with it. Now, to interpolate. An interpolation is a method of, you have point data and you're going to interpolate all the values between those points. And so you're going to create a surface. You can create something, like a raster data set, where every place has a value associated with it. So there's different models that can be used in order to create the surface from that point data. So in Arcgis Desktop, there's a lot more. There are different types of models that you can use, different types of methods that can be used in order to create the surfaces, and different ways that you can analyze the surface. But with ArcGIS Online, there is some capability. They use a method, I believe it is the Qgis method that they use. And then it will interpolate the values between the known values from the point location. So in this way, there's all sorts of analysis tools in ArcGIS. The one that you're going to, for this particular usage, you go under Analyze Patterns, Interpolate Points, and then you just go through step-by-steps through this, what field you're going to use, what data set here, what field you're going to use. Do you want it quickly or accuracy? If it goes through more iterations in order to create something that is a more accurate representation, you do that. And then you tell it what you want it to call it and where you want to store it. And my dog is barking, sorry. And then you let it run analysis, and voila, you get a surface. Let me just check my dog while you look at that. The joys of living with COVID. You work at home. Okay, so here, and these gradations here and all that, Peter, that's again default. I haven't done anything with it, so you could probably go into it and change the classification and gradations as well. So, so these are strange looking numbers, and I'm sure you can clean it up. I didn't for this exercise right now, but what you see, so now you have a surface, and where it's created the different contours of how the temperatures are changing in this area. So you can definitely see that there is a hotter spot in New York City that gets cooler, and there's different bubbles and curves to it. So so here you go. That's one surface, and there are different methods. Again, even within the Qgis, there's different ways that you can do this interpolation, and then you can also analyze it for the errors. So you can get root mean square error output from it, so that you can compare the different methods available through ArcGIS Online and see which one might be create the best interpolation for the data set you're working with. So cool, huh? All done magic like that for you online. So yes, so here you can go in and change the style, what it looks like. So I actually forgot I did that. So you can clean it up to make it your product. If your map that you create, you can make it look a lot nicer than what it was. You can also work with the transparency. If you're having a different data sets on top of each other, and you want to show relationships or show patterns between these two different data sets, one of the tricks is to use which one's on top of the other data set to make it more transparent. So when you go into its style, you can change the color, and you also can change the transparency of it. So there's different ways to create a nice looking map or product that gives you a fairly clear understanding, it shows clearly what is going on in the map. Okay, so now you have an interpolation. You're looking, exploring at the urban heat island effect here. So let's go see if we can look at other data sets. So in using the data set for creating the interpolation service, okay, I brought one in through the through a data set I had on my desktop. And if you have a population density data set, a shape file, then you could, and you have that on your desktop, a zipped folder, you could zip it and bring it in a population density from your desktop. Another way is to add data, and you can add data through looking at what they have as Living Atlas. There's other ArcGIS Online, you can do searches, and there's within your own content, and if your organization, there are different ways or a different, if you want kind of like clearinghouses that you can go to and access data in those different clearinghouses. A really cool one is a Living Atlas, and this has a lot of different data that these data sets have been vetted. Well, yes, for the most part. So they're generally pretty good and reliable. But having said that, always look at who did it. You know, so Jennifer Bell, you know, I don't know who that person is. If something's with Esri, I'm pretty confident that it's going to be, you know, a quality data set. So always look at who or where the data set is coming from to make sure that it's good. So I'm going to choose from the Living Atlas, and I'm going to then have a search tool, and I'm putting in population density United States. I let it go, and voila, the first one at the top is 2020 USA population density. And I'm going to add that to my interpolated surface. And this is what I get here for the USA population density. This comes from the Census Bureau. And this is, so 2020 population density. So how can that be 2020? I'm curious about that because we're going through the census still. Huh. I'll have to think about that. When you work with the US Census data, you have to, there's different levels or spatial or levels of the data. So each state has different counties. Well, we have the country itself, and you can get population density for the entire country. It'll give you one value for the entire country. So it's going to give the, you know, the average value for, you know, that will have places in New York City compared to the boondocks someplace where there's very few people. You can give average population densities for each state, okay? Then you can get into population densities for the counties. So each state is made up of different counties. And some counties will have, and each county is going to have a different population density. Some rural, some urban. You can look at you can look at things in terms of zip codes, which is an area as well. In counties, you can go into a smaller unit that is called a tract. And then within that, you can get something even smaller that is like looking at, like in New York, a city block, or you know, a small area, and get very detailed information about a particular location. So depending on what scale you're looking at, what size of an area, you might want to be looking at the, that will determine at what scale you want data, the data sets to, that you use. So if you want something very detailed, small area, then you're going to be wanting to look at the data at the tractor block group. Some data sets will also be in the congressional units, as congressional districts. So that's not shown here, but you can also get data in terms of congressional districts as well. So this is what this is the county level population density that I brought in from the Living Atlas. Oh, and then oh, I didn't capture one. I didn't capture that screenshot. What I then laid over was you know, 50% transparency of the urban heat island effect, and you can see that there is a good relationship between population density and the temperature. I'm sorry about that. I thought that I had that, but I skipped that one. But you can do then all sorts of other searches. You can look for impervious surfaces, because that might have a relationship between impervious surfaces and heat island. You can look at land cover.
Yes,
so
Becky, I actually want to put a pitch in right now for that global land cover 1992 to 2018. People can actually use that data set right there to time travel back in time for their area of interest, for their location, and explore the land cover that has been mapped for their area. And so that aligns perfectly with what we're asking everybody to do for their area of interest. And I was doing that yesterday, and it's pretty interesting to see what other people have mapped out for the different areas of interest that we have. So and the nice thing is you can just click on a pixel and you'll actually get the value of the land cover at that location. So it's another way for you to put together your own data set for your particular area. At a location, do I have a mosquito trap? And if so, what's the land cover associated with that? So I just wanted to kind of highlight that for everybody, because this is where you can find some additional attributes or information to describe your area of interest.
Awesome. Excellent. So this is now, you get so here, like on my next slide here, there are lots of resources out there. It's what you want to do, which is of interest. And now the world's at your fingertips with your keyboard and the access to the internet. And you just have to learn how to get that data and analyze it and put it to good use. So I'm just some ending few. Oh, you want to say something?
No, go ahead. Just go ahead and finish up.
Okay, so I just have a few slides here. If you want to, I have, this is my course website here for my introductory course in at my undergraduate introductory course in GIS. Under assignments here, there are different exercises, there are different resources here. This is, you know, this you can access here if you want to look at it. If you want to have some lessons to learn more applications and skills, there's a lesson gallery, Esri. They got lots of great activities for you to learn. Some of them are for ArcGIS Online, others are desktop, so you have different applications, different software, so you have to to pick the ones that that you can use with the softwares that are available to you. With COVID, there's a lot out there, and Esri has done a lot. If you're interested in looking at relationships later on, relationships of who being targeted where, equity issues, all sorts of good stuff out there that's been made available. And this, I just wanted to show, this is always changing. This is something new that I'm going to have to, I want to learn, something called Arcgis Insights. And actually, I don't know much about it, but I just want to show, this looks like it's very cool. These are ways in which you can analyze and visualize data, both in terms of maps and graphs. And you create a workplace, and you can have all sorts of analytics associated with the data sets that you're doing. So I'm actually going to explore this and see what we can do with it. And so good stuff. And so there's ways that you can use this Arcgis Insights through Arcgis Online. So again, it's always, the software and the applications are always in flux, always moving, and things being developed. I also just wanted to, there's next week, actually, there is an Esri user conference. If you can join virtually, and they're making it free. So if you are interested in just getting a feeling for what types of different applications that people are doing, both in the research community, management community, all sorts of different types of users for GIS, business, management, government, research, consider signing up and looking at the agenda and see if there's some things that you want to look into. And that's it. I'll stop sharing my screen.
That has been super fantastic, nuts and bolts, down in the weeds, out in space. I couldn't have anticipated a better presentation, except that I know Becky well, and I know what she does is always awesome. When you're doing your analyses, you might find it useful just to go back and sort of fast forward to the place where she's actually talking about where to find resources and first and second steps, because I find it's sometimes hard for me to remember those first steps. And then once I'm in that first step, then I can remember the whole process. So really super great. Becky, like I said, I've put those data sets in the web folder. And if you send me the URL of your course website, I'll also put that up. And
I forgot that. It's embedded in the, it's embedded in the PowerPoint, but I can send that to you as well. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that'd be great. Good. All right. I think we've gone over time. So I don't know if anybody has a pressing question for Becky. I think she could stay another couple minutes. Otherwise, I think that we can move on to everything else we're going to do today. Peter, do you want to announce the next two Meet Up and Do Science meetings? And I will write them down with the right time zone, because everybody knows that I am time zone dyslexic and challenged. Okay.
All right. So let's meet up tomorrow from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Pacific time, as I'm the early or the late one, depending on which way you're going, right? And we'll also do again another Friday from 9 to 10 a.m. Pacific time. So that'll give us a chance for you to maybe go explore some of the great things that we've learned about today. Explore some of the data. I've shared the data I've put up there for our areas of interest in ArcGIS Online, and so you don't actually have to go find anything else. You just have to add it from your organization. So if you have any questions about that, show up tomorrow. And I want to highlight tomorrow between 9 to 10 a.m. I will be highlighting how you can actually start gathering specific satellite data for your particular area of interest, which has been something a lot of people have talked about. So, and what we saw today is how to take these point-specific locations and do some mapping in between those points. And so you could actually be thinking about we were shown temperature data today, but you could actually think about the same approach if with your mosquito larvae information. You know, if you have more than 0, you could actually create a surface grid to predict where you might find mosquito larvae if you have sampled across your area of interest. So I just wanted to put that out there as a way of connecting what you've been doing in the field with some of the techniques we learned today. If you have any questions, show up tomorrow or Friday, definitely 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific time, either day, and we'll give it a little extra time tomorrow for some more in-depth questions as everybody's working on their research project and trying to figure out what they're doing. So thanks, and I appreciate everybody's hard work that they put in. I've seen progress on all of our Collect Earth online interpretations. We're almost at 50, and so at least for the first part. And so if you have questions about that or just want to spend some time working together, that's what we'll be doing. So like I said, I appreciate everybody's contribution to that, and I think we saw some great ways we can start analyzing and thinking about our data. I will mention though for everybody, you right now cannot do any analysis with our ArcGIS Online. We need to enable that feature for everybody. And so right now you can make a map, but you can't actually do some of the additional interpolation and analysis that we saw today. So we're hoping to change that, but just mention, note to everybody who's here, if you can't find the button that was shown today in this demonstration, that's what it is. And so hopefully we can get that straightened out so you can do your own analysis using this really powerful tool set.
Great.
Well, I hope you get bitten by the bug and want more.
Good.
I'm going to say goodbye. It's been a
Okay,
pleasure.
thanks, Dr. Boger. We'll see you soon, I hope. Thanks again for helping us today. Okay, bye-bye.
Great. Bye-bye.
Peter, could you stay on a minute?
Yes, I definitely can, Cassie.
Hi, I was wondering if we could run our project idea by you. We had a few questions regarding like how to get our data and how to analyze it appropriately.
Yes. Yeah, I can answer probably a couple quick questions, and then tomorrow we'll have a little bit more chance to kind of dive in, because I think tomorrow will be, you know, that's where we'll be gathering all of the specific environmental variables that go along with every one of those point locations, so Prachi, kind of along these lines, I've been thinking about you know, the statistics that you guys are doing, like you know, or kind of thinking about, like, that's actually like kind of a first step that almost everybody should kind of be going through and doing, right? And then what Dr. Boger was showing us today is sort of like the application of that and kind of going through. And so I think, you know, we can help guide you through some of those questions, sort of what statistics should you sort of be running initially, and some of those kinds of things. So yeah, what are you guys kind of running up against?
So currently what we're thinking of doing is with the land cover globe observations, we would create some sort of tool that can automate like the classifications. And then as an extension of that, we could create some sort of summary of the location where you are currently standing and identify it as one of the Collect Earth Online categories.
Yeah. Yeah, so that sounds like, you know, exactly what you should be doing for a project like this. And so I like that in terms of, you know, it brings together a couple of our different tool sets, and hopefully it streamlines some of the work that we've been doing, and gives us a way of sort of identifying you know, basically how green or how wet is an area, or where we're most likely to find mosquito habitat, right? And so the first thing that we do need to sort of identify is, where are we finding mosquitoes, right? What is the statistical values that we're getting along those lines? You know, how wet is it? How green is it? Some of those kinds of things. So there's kind of this basic descriptive statistics piece that pretty much everybody needs to sort of do initially. What's your elevation? What's your elevation range? then that mosquito larvae piece is really kind of an important one. And that's what we then feed into the model to go say, hey, go find us all these other locations. And so that's kind of that tool that you guys are talking about building. So that makes a lot of sense. And so I think, between now and tomorrow or Friday, one thing you might that I think would be useful for your group to do is to start thinking about the data structure. So what is that spreadsheet that it's going to look like? So you'll have a plot ID as one row, then you have the latitude, longitude, so that places it at a location. And then what other values do you want beyond that? Dr. Mike Wimberly mentioned, elevation might be a really important one. So we'll want to have that inside of there. And then he also mentioned moisture being an important one, and temperature. So with your group, go through and kind of identify what those environmental characteristics are that you're wanting to add to that point to describe it, and then we can help you to kind of find the data sets that will that you can pull that data point from. So at this location, it is 1,000-meter elevation. At this point, it has a greenness of this value on June 21st, or that kind of thing. And so if you guys can kind of think about the data that you guys need to sort of start answering that question, that will help us point to the right places to be able to get that. And then tomorrow between 9 and 10, I'll show you a website where you can take your points, submit it to NASA, and then get all this remote sensing data back. So yeah, so that will speed up a lot of what we're doing with it, and so that's kind of a new tool, and so I wanted to make sure everybody gets a chance to actually see how to run that, how to do that, and how to access. I think it's almost 50 satellite measurements that are available for these points, and so and what you're talking about in terms of you're in this location, the satellite land cover shows this. You're most likely to be also seeing this, trees or water or that kind of thing. And so what we talked about today with the using the spatial data and what is in this location is kind of what you guys are trying to, the process that you're trying to automate. And so that's where the Python code actually interacts and does that. Go grab the data, now put it into your spreadsheet, and now put it onto a map kind of thing. So it all ties together, and this ArcGIS Online piece is a way that we might be able to show that to other people, share it, kind of build some of that in. So yeah, so I like where you're going. And how big is your group now?
3 people.
All right. Okay, good. Perfect. That's manageable. You guys can probably find a time to actually meet as well. So yeah, so that sounds like a good idea. And so kind of based off of the last couple of days, think about the data, the other pieces of data that you might need. One thing that you guys, since you're kind of thinking about the both the collect Earth piece as well as the on the ground picture, you can take that on the ground picture and you can do the same sort of remote sensing techniques. How green is the picture? How blue is the picture? How gray is the picture? You can actually analyze it in the same way. And that's where ImageJ, you can kind of use that as well. So a lot of the techniques that we talk about when we're looking from space could also be applied to the ground photos. So just kind of, I'll throw that in there because you kind of mentioned, using these things together, just kind of recognize that there is similar techniques that follow through between the two different digital images or raster values, if you want to think about it like that. So hopefully that helps and kind of gets you moves you a little step forward, and be glad to talk a little bit more, show some more tomorrow during those office hours.
That seems like a great first step, like figuring out how we want to organize our data, and then from there seeing what we can do.
Yeah, that's usually the first step that I go through, is just like, out of everything that's available to me, what is it that I really need to start gathering and thinking about it before I actually go out. Yep.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Prachi.
I had a quick question about the webinar for the mosquito webinar on Thursday. If I submitted a video to you, will that,